Hello, today is Monday, June 3rd, and welcome to episode 343 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI Senior Fellow Lester Munson. I'm joined today by NSI's founder and executive director, Jamil Jaffer, and my fellow Senior Fellow, Morgan Vigna. Today we're going to talk about the balloon war going on between North Korea and South Korea. Over the weekend, if you were not paying attention, North Korea launched approximately 1,000 balloons at South Korea filled with various kinds of garbage. There's been a discussion about what was in the garbage. It appears that there was no toxic elements or weapons of any kind, but it is notable that North Korea sent these garbage-filled balloons against its adversary, South Korea. There's some interesting context for this. South Korea recently allowed, through a Supreme Court decision, the resumption of pamphleteering into North Korea from evangelicals and other groups. And this North Korea balloon launch may be a response to that. Also, there was a summit a week ago of China, Japan, and South Korea. Not much was accomplished, but it was notable that they all met. North Korea may have been upset by that. Also, North Korea has recently launched, last few months, about 1,000 ballistic missiles in contravention of UN sanctions. There was an emergency UN Security Council meeting to discuss this issue. Notably, Russia and China effectively took the North Korean side and urged restraint and everyone to have understanding of what the pressure was, of this terrible pressure that North Korea is under. Also, notably, there's going to be military exercises between the U.S., South Korea, and Japan in the next few weeks over the summer. North Korea has traditionally taken adversarial actions in response to these military exercises, calling them a threat to their sovereignty and security. Jamil, I have a question for you. What would you do if your neighbor launched balloons filled with garbage into your yard?
Well, I might start playing the 999 poop balloons song, or 99 Luft balloons. Well, who knows? Whatever. The 80s song about nuclear war that became very popular. Look, I mean, obviously this is a weird situation. I was just on the Korean border, the DMZ, about 3 months ago, earlier this year. It is a very interesting place. You can now actually go into the DMZ, or at least into the exclusion zone, the southern exclusion zone on the South Korea side. You can take a gondola over. There's actually a Dunkin' Donuts. You can't make this stuff up in the exclusion zone. But everywhere you look, there are these warning signs about mines being present.
Did you get the T-shirt, Jamil? Did you get the T-shirt at the Dunkin' Donuts?
I not only got the T-shirt, I also got a piece of the barbed wire for my father-in-law from the border. I will say, look, it is a surreal place because it is at once the world's most heavily armed and heavily fortified border. At the same time, the two sides are staring at each other across this little hut. And there's this fake North Korean village on the other side. There's obviously the Seoul, South Korea, the capital, is right up on the DMZ. It is not far. And so when the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un talks about turning Seoul into a burning sea of fire, I mean, it is very close, alarmingly close. And so these balloons are over, and they're clearly designed to create psychological, concern and frustration on behalf of South Korean people. I doubt it's actually working because it just demonstrates what a silly regime the North Korean regime is. At the same time, this is a silly regime with nuclear weapons. And an unstable leader. And so, we should be worried. My wife lived in South Korea for many years. And she actually had the chance to meet with a North Korean defector, one that had gone through the South Korean sort of re-education program. And what was really weird about it was that these people really, even after they've been through the re-education program and after they've left North Korea and wanted to leave the regime, they still think, Americans and Westerners are the devil. And so it's a really interesting scenario how brainwashed, unfortunately, the people in North Korea are by their disturbed leadership.
Morgan, the balloon episode is certainly notable on a number of levels. South Korea has threatened to retaliate by blasting K-pop into North Korea. What do you think of this threat?
Well,
BTS.
So look, I mean, North Koreans waging low-level biological warfare against the South Koreans is clearly a bit silly at this point. I mean, same thing with, the blasting of K-pop. This is like tit for tat. This has been going on for a while now. And so again, like I sort of see this as more of the same. It is kind of absurd if you think about it in terms of like the pettiness of it all. But when it really comes down to it, I mean, North Korea, nevertheless, is still a major threat. I mean, they, as Jamil noted, they have quite a disturbed regime leading it, but one that has nuclear weapons. We saw this emergency session of the UN Security Council play out where you had, members of the P5, permanent 5 members of the Security Council, specifically, Russia and China, defending DPRK and, blasting the United States for our escalatory actions with respect to those military exercises. Whereas the United States is just sort of like, what are you talking about? This is, we have absolutely zero hostile intentions towards DPRK. As a matter of fact, we have reached out to the regime many of time without any preconditions. I mean, certainly we saw, efforts made under the Trump administration to reach out to the regime, and I wouldn't go so far as to normalize relations, but to restart talks, right? And so, nevertheless, you've got the permanent 5 members of the Security Council divided here with, Russia and China clearly, and of course DPRK, clearly siding on one side. DPRK and China notably have provided arms and material and equipment to Russia to kill Ukrainians. And then, of course, you've got the United States and our European members, the UK and France, who have firmly sided with, democracy and sovereignty on the other side. So, again, it's all of pointing of fingers, and really, at the end of the day, just demonstrates the fecklessness of the council.
Jamil, I want to ask you a more serious question than about these trashy balloons. As Morgan points out, North Korea is the not so junior member of this emerging axis of evil with Russia, China, and Iran.
Yeah.
Can we actually try to peel them off, the North Koreans off from this alliance, or should we, as the last administration tried to do, or should we be trying to tie them directly to Beijing and hold China responsible for the actions of North Korea? Which way do we go?
Yeah, the latter. I think it's going to be impossible to peel the North Koreans off this, axis of upheaval or whatever you want to call it. That's Michael Allen's term rather than the axis of evil. I like the axis of upheaval. But look, I think the real problem is that they've always relied on the Chinese, right? They relied on the Chinese to save their bacon during the Korean War. They've relied on the Chinese to provide them with access to food and supplies. At the end of the day, China is the lifeline for North Korea, other than its sort of money theft program where they're stealing money online. But by and large, they are the lifeline for this government, and they're the ones who tacitly endorse their bad behavior, including the poop balloons over South Korea and the constant nuclear saber rattling. And so the people to hold accountable for North Korean bad behavior are the Chinese, and we've got to call them to account. The problem is we've talked about this for years and years and years under Republican and Democratic administrations. We've never done it. And this pipe dream that the Trump administration had that we'd be able to cut a deal with the North Koreans was about as silly as the idea that the Mexicans would pay for the border wall. Neither happened. Neither was going to happen. It was always a pipe dream. And hopefully, if in fact President Trump is reelected, hopefully he doesn't pursue another silly pipe dream like that one.
Morgan, I'll just add on one second, Les. I will just add on to what Jamil said, that under the Trump administration, we were able, with China's help, because they didn't veto the UN Security Council resolution, putting really strict sanctions on DPRK. China went along with that. So I think it is notable that China has held DPRK accountable before. At the same time, though, I don't see that happening anytime soon, just given the current state of U.S.-Chinese relations.
So, Morgan, BTS says, don't be trapped in someone else's dream. Are you saying we can't peel North Korea off from this alliance of upheaval or whatever we're calling it?
I don't see it happening.
Okay.
No.
All right. That's a wrap. Thanks so much to Devlin Burney, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for their help in producing today's episode. Join us again on Wednesday, June 5th, for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. Fault Lines is now on YouTube, so check out our channel for a video of today's episode. If you like what you heard or saw, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.